Hello, I'm Attorney General Lynn Fitch. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about human trafficking, what it is, how to spot it, and how to report it. We hear a lot about human trafficking these days, but most people don't know what it is or how prevalent it is in our communities. Human trafficking is divided into two categories: sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Sex trafficking is defined as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act, which is the act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. Where the person is under the age of 18, force, fraud, or coercion does not have to be proven. Any commercial sex act with a minor is sex trafficking. Likewise, labor trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of enslaving them. In short, human trafficking is a modern-day form of slavery. Contrary to what you may think, human trafficking does not require movement across our borders. Many times it occurs without an individual even leaving home. This is why you can be such an important part of putting an end to human trafficking, because these scenarios often happen at home or a local business, places you are often around in your daily work. You have an opportunity to help someone who is being trafficked. All you need to know is how to spot the signs of human trafficking and how to report it. In today's video, you'll hear from Philip Hendricks, one of our investigators at the Attorney General's office. Philip will share with you the key things to look for as you go about your job. As a utility worker who makes routine visits to homes and businesses, you are in a unique position to spot and report potential signs of human trafficking. With this information, you might be the hero these victims need. Now let's hear from Philip and Sarah Fullen with the Mississippians Against Human Trafficking Coalition to learn more about how you can be the solution.
Thank you, Attorney General Fitch. I'm Sarah Fullen, Executive Director for the Mississippians Against Human Trafficking, and we're here to talk to you today about the importance of knowing the signs of human trafficking and what you can do to help fight it. Sitting down with us today is Philip Hendricks, an investigator for the Attorney General's office on the human trafficking team. Investigator Hendricks, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
So this is a heavy topic, and it's one that people really need to know about. So I'm hoping you can provide a little bit of insight for our utility workers and anybody that's going to view this video as to what they can look for when it comes to human trafficking, because as we know, it's happening everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's not just in other states or other cities or other countries, it's happening right here in Mississippi. So talk to me a little bit about the most common situations you find human trafficking and who are involved in those.
The two types of human trafficking that law enforcement encounter in Mississippi are going to be labor trafficking and sex trafficking. Labor trafficking, a lot of times it occurs where it's someone's working for a business, but they're not on the company's employment records. They're getting paid cash. Sometimes it's less than the federal minimum wage. Sometimes when it's time for them to receive payment, they don't get all of it or they don't get any. The businesses that engage in this kind of predatory behavior, a lot of times it's vulnerable populations that they're targeting. It's people that maybe don't have work visas or they're undocumented immigrants. So it's people that are going to be probably hesitant to go and report this to law enforcement, and so they just get away with it essentially, and unless law enforcement finds out about it and steps in. The other type of human trafficking, and this is what we encounter the most, is the sex trafficking. And the two types of sex trafficking are familial trafficking and then pimp-controlled commercial sex. Familial trafficking is heartbreaking, and the first time I even heard about it, I kind of didn't believe the report because I was told, it's a minor child and she's being trafficked by her grandmother. And we all come from, we're a product of our environment, and I'm thinking, well, my grandmothers were saints. There's no way a grandmother would really be doing this. But we looked at the evidence and found out that was exactly the case. This young lady was being sold repeatedly in sex for money transactions, and her relative was receiving the proceeds from that. Then, of course, the kind that's most common is you can be your pimp-controlled commercial sex. A lot of times the pimps They'll find someone that's vulnerable, whether that be, and it could be a minor or an adult. If it's a minor, a lot of times it's someone that's run away from either their home or from foster care. And what the pimps will do is just try to find what does that person need and then offer them that. Of course, no intention of actually providing it, or if they do, it's just to gain their trust and then exploit them. But a lot of times it's promises of a place to live, or if the person has a substance abuse problem, they provide them with drugs. And sometimes it's the person needs love or a family. And so the pimp makes them believe they're in a romantic relationship, and then they kind of flip it on them pretty quick to where they're saying, well, you also need to do this to make money for us.
I know a question that, that we get a lot with the coalition is it trafficking if they don't go anywhere? Can you kind of provide some clarity on, do these situations even have to cross county lines or state lines for it to be considered trafficking?
They absolutely do not, and I'm glad you said that. When I first heard about human trafficking, what was in my mind was human smuggling, like bringing people into this country illegally. No, now there is sometimes for federal prosecution, it helps if there is an interstate nexus. But the main things that we're looking for if it's an adult victim is force, fraud, or coercion. And of course, if it's a minor who's engaged in commercial sex, the force, fraud, and coercion is inherent in that predatory relationship. So we don't have to prove that in the same way as with an adult. But it could be, you could have human trafficking, sex trafficking going on and never leave the city or the county.
Which probably makes it even harder to detect. If it's happening out of a home, unless you know what's going on in that home, you you may not know that this is even happening.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to, where in Mississippi do we see this happen more often? I know, like you said, a lot of us have in our mind what's actually human smuggling, and you think of larger cities and ports where people are coming in from other countries. Where in Mississippi do we see this problem of human trafficking prevalent?
Literally everywhere. I have cases all the way in the coastal counties, all the way up to, near Memphis. It can be where it's most commonly reported is it kind of your low rent hotels or extended stay hotels where commercial sex is prevalent. But the truth is, the labor trafficking, a lot of times that takes place in rural areas, in the agriculture industries, and then familial sex trafficking can take place literally anywhere that a family lives.
I mean, I think that's probably scary for people to think about, that, there could be neighbors or people that they know that are involved in this, and unless they know the signs to look for, they can't help in any way.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how, when this was first kind of coming into the collective conscious, I had a lot of police tell me that doesn't happen here. And then I'm like, well, let me tell you about this case we made just a few miles from where we're standing right now.
Right. And I think another thing that I've heard law enforcement say is, we've been seeing this type of victim for years, and we just never really knew what to call it. And now we have a name for it, and when you have a name for it, you have a plan of action for how to help those victims and not just to apprehend the person that's doing this to them.
Well, absolutely. And for a long time, I think a lot of especially with sex trafficking, they were arresting the victims for prostitution and never even finding out that there was a pimp in the next room who was really the one making all the money.
Well, I think it's important for people to know that there's now legislation out there, thanks to the Mississippi legislature, that kind of helps to curb some of that, helps to protect our victims, and those are some things that have been passed in the last couple of years. So more attention is obviously coming to this issue on, a state level, and not just the local level, and that's giving the police officers what they need to be able to handle these cases. So I think that's a good thing to note for people to be aware of. There's a lot of misconceptions about the type of people, I think, that are involved in human trafficking. Does this industry differentiate between race or gender or sex, or is everyone kind of could be a victim depending on where they are and if they are targeted by some of these individuals?
Absolutely. I've met victims that were every race, ethnicity, gender. I've also met perpetrators, predators that were males, females, and I've met trans persons who were both victims and suspects in these cases.
And you talked a little bit about the hotels that we kind of find this happening out of. this isn't just specific to, you know, and I'm focusing on sex trafficking, I guess. This isn't just specific to our larger cities. This is also rural counties and areas like that we're finding this in.
Well, absolutely. And in Mississippi, you really don't have any what I consider large cities.
Right.
But no, in small cities, they may only have 2 or 3 hotels, but you almost always have that lower, you know, that cheaper hotel, and a lot of times that if someone was to get online and they were looking for that kind of thing, they would find out it was going on in their town.
So as we know, utility workers are in such a unique position, like we just talked about, but what are the things that they can look for? What are some of the signs walking into these establishments or homes that they need to be aware of in the event they need to report something?
Well, and I will definitely cover what I think they should look for. And first, I also want to just say what I think it's not. Every few months or so, I'll see a post on social media where someone has shared that, you know, somebody followed them around in a grocery store. They went outside and there was a mark, some kind of suspicious mark on their vehicle. I'm not aware of any cases in Mississippi ever that was how a trafficker, you know, got their victim. It's not like in the movies where they get snatched off the street. Usually it's a finesse pimp who makes them believe that he's going to make their dreams come true. As far as signs of trafficking, I would say if a utility worker sees juveniles or minors and they're with people that clearly are not their parents in some kind of place that would be, you know, lend itself to a compromising situation, like a low-end hotel. Also, I would say minors if they seem to have a lot of cash or multiple cell phones. Another thing that almost every sex trafficking situation that I've been, you know, encountered, usually the waste baskets, if they haven't been changed, they'll have large number of used condoms or condom wrappers. And I would say just about every case, either the victim or the trafficker himself will have a large, you know, collection of hotel room keys, and that gives me one of two things: either they're part of a group that has control of multiple hotel rooms at a time, or they've been moving from hotel room to hotel room for a while. So anytime I see several keys, I'm immediately suspicious. Now on the labor trafficking side, I would say if a utility worker sees a house and way more people are living in it than what you would think, you know, what the house was designed to support, especially if they seem to be living in it in shifts, like one group sleeps while the other group goes to work and then, you know, they switch, that could definitely indicate labor trafficking. Also, if you see people living in buildings that were not actually designed to be residences, such as, you know, storage units or warehouse space.
So they walk into a home, they walk into a business, they're on their job, and they see something that looks odd. First of all, I think it's important to say, if you see anything that looks unusual, report it.
Absolutely.
It may not be a trafficking situation, but it could be another situation. What do they do? What do they do in those situations? How do they interact with the individuals, whether they be a victim of trafficking or they be a trafficker themselves?
I would encourage them to initially just act nonchalant. Please, don't let on that you're suspicious that something's going on, because if the trafficker becomes aware that you're aware, then he will probably want to move the victims or begin destroying evidence prior to law enforcement arriving. I would encourage them to just, you know, go to their vehicle. If they have to, make an excuse why they're going to their vehicle. Go and don't leave the site. Go and immediately notify law enforcement of what they've seen, what they're suspicious of, and then maintain they become the eyes on then until the police get there. Just they give a description of the people, of the vehicles. If people leave, try to give a description of the vehicle with you know, a tag number and a direction of travel.
Is there ever a situation in which they should engage?
I would say no, with the extreme exception of if they feel like if the victim is in immediate physical danger, then that's going to be up to them. That if they feel comfortable that they can intervene, but in almost all situations, I would say create some distance and notify law enforcement. And if the victim is a minor, of course, they should notify CPS. And what would also be beneficial is once they make their, you know, initial report to law enforcement, they could contact the human trafficking hotline, and then also they could contact Mississippi Attorney General's office and let us know that, hey, we've made a possible trafficking related report to our local law enforcement that might be something for us to follow up on.
Well, I think we had some really good information today to pass on to our utility workers so that they know what to report and when to report it and what to look for when they're on the job. I just want to thank you so much for providing your insight to human trafficking and what's going on in Mississippi.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
If you ever are concerned that you see something relating to human trafficking, you can always call the national hotline at 1-888-373-7888 or contact your local law enforcement. It's never a bad thing to report something you've seen. You can also contact the coalition at info@msaht.org with any questions you might have, or you can contact the Attorney General's office. We again want to thank Investigator Hendricks and Attorney General Lynn Fitch, as well as Atmos, for sponsoring this video to make sure that you have the tools that you need to say no more to human trafficking in the state of Mississippi.